It is now 4 o'clock, well, somewhere in the world, and it is time for this week's Got-IT Talks. I'm lucky enough to be able to present Yvonne Prinzellner, Dr. Yvonne Prinzellner, today. And as you know, Yvonne, because I know that you've been joining as a participant, spectator from time to time, very tradition in these Got-IT Talks is, of course, that we get to learn just a little bit about your story and why you're actually working in this digital health field, and your professional passion, really.
Oh,
So,
there's so many. Where shall I start?
But we have an hour, so
Yeah, we sure do. We sure do. Currently I'm working as a researcher at the Johanniter Research and Innovation Center in Vienna. That's actually how I got to be part of these wonderful Got-IT Talks, because it's a project I'm currently participating in and working in as a researcher. But my background is actually in communication science. That's what I'm really passionate about. I specialized on media psychology, educational technology along the way. Like, how do we learn online? How can we make classes exciting for people in order to engage them? And then later on, when I did my PhD, hi Knut, can you turn off your camera just for now?
Okay.
Thank you. And then later on, during my PhD, I specialized more so on online communication and health communication, especially, it's still turned on. Okay. Specialized on health communication, especially concerning the vulnerable groups of young girls and women, and how they seek social support and how they get empowered online in search of health communication. So that is actually what led me down the path of being passionate about health, and especially how to communicate health and what kind of aspects to look at in particular, especially when it comes to the knowledge of getting information online and how do people communicate, how do they engage with each other.
it's a wide field. So you became passionate about this because, I mean, your background, did you, I mean, you didn't get born, I suppose, thinking, digital health, that's just it. Your path into this?
Yeah, I tend not to be so fatalistic
Yeah,
as to say
right.
digital.
I'm
Say that
sorry.
again?
No. I mean, there might be different passions. Some are, some have grown into digital health because they wanted to build stuff. Some are passionate about the power of conversation between people. I mean, there are different
Yeah,
pathways into.
when it comes to communication online, mostly like in communication science, we're mostly looking at mass media, right? And studying the internet for me means looking at the micro level of how people are able to be motivated to become active in preventive measures, especially concerning their health. What measures we as society and in policy making need to do in order to, you know, get people or give people the right tools in order to be able to, just kind of use the preventive factors that are available for them online. So that's actually more of what it is I'm looking at special vulnerable groups, especially the ones that are harder to reach, the ones that might be a little more hidden online, the ones that are not so obvious. That's kind of my passion when it comes to health and when it comes to online communication in particular.
So in a way, I suppose you've been busy the last
Oh,
18 months or so. I mean, a lot of people have been busy, but digital health has suddenly, I mean, taken a significant boost upwards.
yeah,
Digital health, and especially digital communication about health.
yeah.
Has this benefited these groups that you're talking about? It may have benefited your research, but has it benefited the groups?
Well, the thing is, I think it is already, like even pre-corona, there were already so many positive side effects that these people could gain from engaging online. They have just been sort of enhanced. And I always like to think of digital communication as an add-on to the face-to-face communication. And also, studies show that if you have a good social support group offline, or at least one or two people that you can trust in, you will be more sufficient in finding the right kind of information that you need, in particular for yourself, online as well. So, yeah, I don't think that COVID might have changed the game for many day-to-day routines that we have, but it's certainly, especially for the younger people. I remember I was one day that was like a couple of years ago already. I was sitting in a public transport in Vienna, and I listened into some old ladies gossiping about some youngsters sitting right front rows, like a few rows in front of them. And they were all like, they were obviously a group of friends. They were around, I don't know, 10 to 12 years old. I can't recall. And they were all sitting there just having their smartphones in their hands and just texting each other. And those ladies, they were like, oh my God, look at these young people. They don't even talk to each other anymore. What is going on with them? Don't they know how to communicate anymore? So I think that the younger people have already reached this phase before us, actually, the middle-aged group that has only, kind of gotten into the internet when they were around, like, say me, for example. I was 12 when I had my first computer, and then we're not really talking about using the internet in a proper way because the internet as such did not exist in that way back then. But the youngsters, they've already been using the internet a lot, and I think this has just, COVID has just sort of enhanced it. The problem that I actually see at the moment with COVID and everything, particularly when we're looking at the education part of it, is that those people who should actually be teaching them on how to reflect on their use of media and how to properly use it in order to gain the most benefits are the ones that are the least familiar with it and are the ones that are the least engaged in online communication in a proper way. And I think this is one of the major issues because you cannot support someone efficiently when it comes to online communication if you have not had any experience with it yourself whatsoever. So, yeah, I think that's one of the major issues, especially looking at schooling right now during COVID.
Are you thinking then, I mean, the ones that should tell them more about it, are we talking about the parents too? Are we talking about the teachers?
We're
Are we
talking
just
about the
talking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking about the teachers in particular, and of course also about the parents. Yes. How many
Mm.
parents really know what their kiddos engage in online? All they know is, having restrictions, telling them, at least in, German-speaking countries, most of the time, the use of the internet or of media in general, like watching television, using YouTube, whatever, is looked at in a very restrictive way. Like, don't watch too much television, don't use your smartphone too often, you're just online all the time. Instead of really showing interest in what the kids are doing and engaging with the kids together and what it is they are doing, talking with them about what it is they're doing, trying to find ways together on how to connect with other people in case they have questions. Because, honestly, right now, it's really difficult, especially for kids. They very much so depend on their peer group. We're talking about mental health, for example, in order to, keep their mental health and their well-being on a stable level. They don't really have access to that right now because they're like closed up mostly if they don't get to go to school. So one way of really empowering themselves could be to connect with their peers online, but there's
Hmm.
different ways on how to do so. And I think you as a parent have the obligation to at least know what is out there and to at least know on how to most efficiently use it in order for your kids to have the most benefit for it. Doesn't mean that you have to use it yourself, but you have to at least have an overview and have tried it once, before you kind of put it into damnation saying, this is something terrible, they shouldn't use it. If you don't know what's going on, then, I remember I was actually together with my PhD supervisor in Thuringia. Back then, there was this YouNow stream, where people could just stream everything online, and mostly teenagers were using it. It's very similar to the platform Twitch these days, if you know it. That's like a gaming streaming
Yes,
platform
not
that,
that old. Yes.
yeah, that kids use a lot. And I remember the media picked up this topic as saying, pedophiles are stalking young people in their bedrooms. Um, so my PhD supervisor and me, we were like, okay, let's check this out, like what is happening on you now. And we really took the time for a couple of days to just log into the streaming platform and just watch those people. You know what the kids did? They did their schoolwork and they just had their laptop open besides it for
Hmm.
hours on end. It was the most boring thing I've ever seen. There was no predators. There were no like nasty talks going on or whatever. It was just a means of feeling connected with the audience that you have out there. And sometimes they would ask each other, how are you? And then the one doing the homework would ask, like, I can't solve this math equation, can you help me out? But that was it, the most boring thing ever.
Hmm.
So I think before you say something is bad, you shouldn't use it online. You should really take the time, especially as a parent and also as a teacher, because it's your profession, it's something you're obliged to do, to look into what the tools are actually good for, useful for.
So a mini crash course for parents and teachers to get their first TikTok account and then start creating cute dances would be a way to go, for instance.
Yes, it would be, honestly, it would be a way to go, or even just to look onto the platform, what's happening there. I mean, I can tell you from my experience, there's lots of health information actually being displayed on TikTok right now. And when I'm talking about health, I'm not just talking about like health issues that are being raised there, but health related information that is being given there. Like, for example, say skin issues, like teenagers giving each other tips and advice, whatever, on skin issues they have, which
Hmm.
sometimes is good advice, sometimes is bad advice. But that's where the kids and the teenagers get their information from mainly at this point. So you as a parent should know, if they're online, they're not just, I don't know, dating or sexting or doing whatever nasty stuff you can think of. Not that that is necessary and nasty stuff, but that they're also like really seeking for information that is valuable to their life world, to their situation that they live in right now.
What about then? I mean, um, at one point, I mean, there was a lot of older people that certainly embraced Facebook. And
Yeah.
what happened then was that all the young people disappeared. So
Yes.
once we get, well, me to get a TikTok account and I'll start dancing away, all the young people might disappear. I mean, if we get these parents and teachers to get online on these hipster media, how can we also then balance? I mean, suddenly they can get all kinds of good ideas about how to be polite. And I mean, some of these media are also there to provide a safe space that's, I mean, outside of adult supervision, I suppose.
Um,
Um,
yeah, you're right about that. And this has a lot to do with youth culture. Youth culture not being what it is anymore, or what it used to be, like back in the days a few decades ago, when youth culture was represented by different kinds of music, for example, different dress codes and stuff. We see these kind of phenomena more and more disappearing. And they're more and more being kind of placed into this online world. So we have different social media tools, different social media channels. Of course, this should be a safe space for teenagers to, connect with their peers, but that doesn't mean that it's exclusively for the young people. And I'm not saying that the parents should start stalking the
mhm.
teenagers or the kids, but they should at least, you know, not have prejudices against these platforms without ever having talked to their kids about what it is they actually do online. Because otherwise, if you really look at the negative effects of online communication, what happens if you know that your dad or your mom is not fond of you being on TikTok, or I don't know, using, what can I think of right now? Instagram DMs, whatever, because they might be scared that you're talking to random strangers. What happens is that kids, if they really get in trouble, they will not be talking to their parents anymore. And
Hmm.
their parents are their first safeguard, so to speak, when it comes to, like, say, predators or whatever, you know. So that's why I'm very much so of the opinion that there should just be a very open-minded and yeah, open-minded kind of conversation going on about the use of online communication for actually all kinds of people, but especially for young people who are to be considered vulnerable groups. Yeah.
Would you say that this is the same mechanism that we see whenever there's a new media out there? I mean, at one point, I'm not sure exactly when, but let's say the 1920s, 30s, people were, or parents were annoyed that their children were watching or listening to too much radio, and later on they were watching too much TV, and then came other media. They were looking too much at their Game Boy or whatever. So whenever there's a new media out there, I mean, it takes time to develop a culture of using that media. Is this the same with the digital media, or is there something different with the digital media too?
I don't think so. Honestly, I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be even more differentiation between the different platforms. So um, the ways in which you use them are going to be even more specialized, and for, even more very special interest groups. That's what's going to happen. But I don't think, it's always been that way. And we know from communication science, for example, that one medium cannot erase another medium. They're like side by side, just one gets used more often than the other one. That's what we know from theory. That's what we know from studies. So it's just a natural evolution, I would say. That's what it is. But I think it's very important, especially for um, younger people, to be able to also critically reflect on the media use that they have. And they can
Mm.
only do so when they have the option to talk with people about how they use the media they
Mm.
use and in which ways they use it.
Part of what we're talking about today is, of course, digital literacy.
Mhm.
Um, we, as a term, it's something different than literacy. Yet, with
Mhm.
literacy, traditionally, you go to school, you learn how to find your way about the alphabet, and later on, you connect the letters into something else, and then yada yada yada, you learn how to read.
Mhm.
Um, how do we educate the digital literacy?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, I think we should acknowledge that there's always going to be people out there who are not interested in having a digital literacy or being digital literate. There's always going to be people, like, at one point or the other, especially older people. They're like, okay, this is too much stress for me. This is stressing me out. I don't want to know anything about that anymore. I think we should acknowledge that. I think we should also acknowledge that there's not just the internet out there. Mass media still exists. Many forms of media are converging right now, which is pretty cool. But the different medias still exist side by side. And in fact, to be very honest, digital literacy is part of media literacy. So if you are aware of how to reflect on your media use, if you are able to participate in online communication in a meaningful way, and if you are able to judge the quality of the things that you're reading, is that something I can use, something that I can rely on or not? And that very much so depends on the very personal attitudes, experiences that you have. Um, then I think, digital literacy should be part of media literacy, which should be taught at school first and foremost.
Hmm. Well, that was sort of, I guess, a hidden agenda of mine. but as you see, I mean, as you said, we have to recognize that some people do not want, and of course, it's it's their choice not to use digital media, and therefore not necessarily develop their digital literacy. But as a culture, we also say, or as a democracy, we say that it will be unacceptable if we do not teach literacy. So
Hmm.
in the same sense, it would be unacceptable not to teach digital literacy, the media, modern media literacy, in the same way that we still tried, I suppose, to get people to understand the mechanisms of commercials, for instance, and the psychology behind it, in order for them to navigate in the modern world. But as you say, it should be. How do we then get there? I mean, the modern schools, it doesn't seem that they're doing it much now. Is it simply a matter of changing the curricula? Would the
It's a matter of getting the teachers engaged, of
Mhm,
making them see the benefits. Because if you cannot, the thing is when you teach someone, when you're trying to teach someone, that's what I see in my classes, for example. I cannot use teaching methods that I don't feel authentic about because, my students won't buy it. I
mm,
mean, they're very good at spotting that, right? So I have to find a way to kind of deliver the content that I want or have to deliver in a way that I feel comfortable with, at ease with. But that also means that I have to look at the circumstances that I'm teaching in, which mostly is online these days, and that I have to familiarize myself with it. The problem is that teachers actually need teachers in order to be familiarized. They need peers amongst them who spread the word of what benefits, online education and online media could have. I mean, just looking at the way information is still being delivered, mostly is learning management systems that are being used also for schools are
mhm.
actually just content uploads. I mean, how boring is that? Like who likes that? It's like taking a USB stick and just putting stuff on it. That's not engaging. Um, if I might say so, and because I know there's a student of mine here right now who was actually in that class. I just had a media politics class that I taught, and the students were supposed to give lectures themselves on certain topics that they picked themselves. One of them was media literacy, by the way. Um, and I was so fascinated on how they did that, how engaging these lectures were by the students. Maybe that is a way on how to get the teachers more interested, letting the students show them on how engaging, studying online or online tools can be, that it's not
Mhm.
just about a monologue. The internet, and that's one of the things that makes it so unique compared to all the other mass media that we have, is interactive. And this is a factor that has very often been being neglected by the people who should actually, you know, engage others, use the potential that the internet has for interaction and use it wisely. And maybe let the ones who are online way more often, the digital natives, show you the way if you don't know yourself. Because as a teacher, you should always go so far as to say, I know that I know the certain content that I have to teach you guys, but I'm also willing to learn from you. That's, I
Mhm.
think, the most fruitful approach to, teaching and learning, in my opinion.
Well, if so, and slightly to use a much too commonly used phrase, circle back. There's You mentioned the vulnerable groups that you studied.
Mhm.
Some of these are people that are using the opportunity of the internet of finding peers, and therefore they're training their digital literacy because they have a need to navigate these media to do so. Um, so they must be some of those digital natives often. Um, so so is this then also the next sort of the teachers of tomorrow, these sort of vulnerable groups that have actually been trying to survive in a digital space for longer, and therefore they've actually they are able to show better ways for the rest of us and how to actually do this in a good way. I mean, they're
I
used to
wouldn't,
be expensive, I suppose.
yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that they have better ways of doing so. It's just out of their circumstances that they, that's what I like about the internet, actually. It gives you the possibility as a minority group or a vulnerable group to take up your space, right? If you're not being heard offline, you can do so online. This is, of course, attached to certain risks, like, being flamed or hate speech or whatnot. But this is also attached to a lot of benefits. Say, for example, if you are just exploring your sexual identity, you're not sure, you're like 15 years old, you're not sure, am I lesbian? Am I gay? Am I straight? What is that? I would like to play around with my gender identity. What better way to do so than the internet, where you can use nicknames, and kind of, I'm not saying cheat other people or trick other people, but or identity theft, that's something completely different. But like really exploring what it is you like in a safe space,
Hmm.
Um, or maybe even find other people you can like say you're living in a rural area in a small village, and you just found out at the age of 15, oh my god, I'm lesbian, I don't know any lesbians around me, how do I get into the community, how do I do that? There's online forums, there's online groups for that, where you can find other peers that can help you out, like just getting to know each other and finding out whether this is really your path. Or for example, people with a disability, who share their experiences on their daily routines, in blogs, just to kind of put it out there, make it possible for the whole world to see that they are people with a disability, but everyone's going to have a disability at one point in their life, and that's okay, and they're nothing special and nothing unique. And they deal with their problems like everyone else does, they're not aliens, but they're part of the population, a natural part. And these are very, very empowering mechanisms that those people use. And also, like the protective factors, for example, if they get hate speech, they have very close knit groups, activist groups, where they protect each other, and they've been very, what we can learn from these groups is solidarity, because they stand up for each other, they protect each other, um, and they kind of try to, unite for one goal that they have, which is destigmatization.
Mm.
I think that's what we can learn from them, actually, if we took a look,
Well, it has been certainly. I mean, for some groups that have turned to the internet or the online world, finding trolls, and a lot of them, has been a very discouraging experience, that have turned some people off from using the internet, and threatening the conversation there. Um, would you say that the solidarity? I mean, I mean, even major media have a challenge in finding a way of navigating how to actually protect the real popular dialogue and conversation, and yet trying to filter out the too many challenging elements that are also there. But it doesn't seem that many of these, for instance, modern media, that they provide a quick and online course on good behavior or democratic speech or how to exercise digital solidarity, for instance. Would that be a sort of when you sign up for a media account, you get a digital solidarity crash course? Um,
No, I think this is something you have to work for, to be very honest. I think the more you kind of let yourself in on the experience being online and communicating online and just trying out different things. And when I'm saying trying out different things, of course, it means trial and error. Things will go south, they always do. But you can only learn out of experience. And that's also how you will get to know your group, your tribe, the ones that are going to be, you know, solidary with you. One thing we should not forget when we're talking about trolls or hate speech online is that, and this is something that I think is being neglected most of the time in this discussion, most of the people online are so-called lurkers. So they're not even actively engaging in anything. They're just reading through stuff.
Mm.
The few people who are actually active, that's the minority. And I think if we got more people to actively engage and also, stand up like in democracy, when something goes wrong, you go out on the streets. It's one of your rights, right? But the same thing applies for online media, just become active. And I think a lot of it has to do with many people being unsure of what can I write, what can't I write, media literacy, right? How do
Mhm.
I phrase a post, for example, without stepping on anyone's toes? Um, these are the things people should learn first. And if they are able to engage actively online more, so then we're going to have more groups of solidarity that could be a protective factor for the vulnerable groups. Yes.
Um, has this I mean, we're talking at the end of 2021, um, looking into 2022.
Mm-hmm.
There's a special kind of health crisis currently going on.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily endless, but certainly long term.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are the key learnings on this from especially the pandemic then? Would you say? I mean, we've been talking now about how over generations perhaps this has changed. But specifically, I mean, one thing has been the vaccinations. At
Yeah.
one point, we had the debates about certain types of medicine or drugs, whether they were useful or not. You had cases of people in certain countries using disinfectant for things it was certainly not meant for, and so
Mm-hmm.
on. Um, but some of the key learnings from digital health from the pandemic itself, what would you point to that you've been either surprised by or or dismayed by, or
Well, I'm
even
not
happy
really
to see? I mean,
not
it
really
might.
surprised, but I think what we should be more aware of is when it comes to e-health literacy, digital literacy, especially e-health literacy in particular. This is a very complex structure and system. I know that in communication science, we've been trying to study e-health literacy for a very, very long time. And it's just a very dynamic system. And one thing we found is that we do not or not enough take into consideration the person as such, because it always depends, like when you seek for information online, right? Especially when it comes to health information, the people who are most prone to look for health information online are females, middle-aged females with quite a high education. Problem is that mostly during this life phase, they face the least issues with health. So, okay, great. What are we going to do about that? What we should do is take into consideration people look for health communication online at certain stages, especially after diagnosis. The process on how they look for information is going to change um, depending on the stage they have been diagnosed in or whatever issue it is. It depends on their age. And these are all factors that we forget to take into account. Also, and this is one thing that I've seen especially happening during COVID, is that the information that is being provided very, very often so does not target the groups that we actually are trying to reach. It does not. The way the information is phrased, the way the information is displayed is oftentimes way too abstract, way too misleading. I mean, I've just talked about this before. People don't even, most of them don't even know on how to do a blog post, right? Because they're unsure of how to phrase stuff online. And now we expect them, being confronted with statistics and medical information, we expect them to understand that, decipher that. I don't think that this is the way to go. I think we should find more tailored ways on how to reach the certain target groups online with the information concerning COVID. And I think this would clear up a lot of the misunderstandings that cause negative effects, especially when it comes to the willingness of being vaccinated. We know from health communication, like for example, especially when it comes to chronic illnesses like cancer, that people who inform themselves after being diagnosed and having been proposed with a treatment by their physicians, when they go online and they look for information online, and there's like say a YouTube channel where a person is stating negative information about the treatment, which is the same that the patient has just been proposed, that their willingness of getting the treatment proposed by the physician drops, like immediately. So I think one thing we should do maybe also, and this is especially to reach the young people, is give them role models, right? Give them faces. Give COVID a face. Give the vaccination a face, Make it sort of an influencer thing, not in a negative way, but make it more engaging. Use a little more of the infotainment. We know that that works very well. I know it's a very serious topic and it should be taken seriously. And I'm not saying that we should make a comedy out of it, but we should make it more engaging for people in order to understand it.
I think
That's what
you'd
I
like,
promote.
yeah, I think you'd like the latest animation video that WHO and Dr. Tedros shared the other day. It
They
actually
did. Where did they
starts.
share it?
Well, it was focused on the Omicron, but it had the Omicron in the center stage as sort of a rock star ready to take on the world, which
Hmm.
was sort of a different way of communicating about its role. But anyway,
Hmm.
well, you'll see at one point.
I'll look it
But
up. I'll look it up.
thinking of that, I mean, providing targeted information, using stakeholder analysis, and
Hmm.
providing information for your users. I mean, that's classical communication science and doing that. Um, but it also suggests from what you say that maybe we have a challenge of digital literacy among the ones providing the information
Sure.
here. If you think of what you should do with the internet is just pour information down your good old garbage can and fill it up until there's enough. It doesn't really help people on well sifting through the trash because it's hard. So what you're also saying, I think, is that this is actually a kick on the shin of a lot of authorities, maybe that they should have taken their role as communicators slightly more serious.
Very
Uh,
much so.
mm. So would you then say that we're on the right track? I mean, of course, I was just praising WHO and a single animation, but a single animation does not cure the world, I think, sadly. But are you think that they're learning? I was asking you about what have we learned from the pandemic and digital health. Are you seeing online communication improving, either from your research or your gut feeling? Are
Well,
we learning?
I'll have to rely on my gut feeling on this one because I myself have not done any studies concerning COVID per se. But improving. I mean, we're talking about communication here, and we're talking about an instant, a pandemic. No one could have foreseen. I mean, we knew that something similar was going to happen at some point. We just didn't think that it was going to happen at this point. Um, Communication does change, yes, but I think it's a slower process than 1 or 2 years. I think,
Hmm.
and that's what I really think, and that's referring to what you just said before. Yes, politics, policymakers, they should take these lessons and work on their communication with the broader public. And I really mean the broader public. I'm not talking about the well educated Westerners. I'm talking about the broader public, those people that you usually can't reach. And I'm
Hmm.
also saying this in light of what I said before. There's just some people who do not want to engage online, which means that information in an entertaining way also has to be provided via different media than just the internet. You know, it should
Hmm.
not be the case that only those people having access, for example, to the internet are the ones who are knowledgeable. I mean,
Hmm.
knowledge gap, we all know how that works. That's not a good thing.
Hmm.
So we should really like have a consistent, more or less a crisis communication plan for pandemics. I think that's what was missing really, a consistent way of communicating simple messages via different channels in order to reach as many people as we can in a consistent way and not a misleading way and not a fatalistic way. I mean, of
Hmm.
course, looking at the media, we know that you can get people's attention when you do news reports on bad and fatalistic topics. Of course, that catches everyone's attention, but that doesn't have the best effect because it makes people mm, waver with their focus on it. Because at one point or the other, they will say, okay, I switch on the television or I go on the internet and there's just fatalistic news. Everyone's dying, but no one's telling me what to do exactly. What can I do? Giving the people, and there we go again with the empowerment, giving the people tools on how to feel empowered. Okay, I'm doing the best that I can right now. I'm a trooper, right? That's what was missing, I think, and that's something we should be working on even more.
It's a very interesting research being done at the University of Aarhus on that particular topic by Michael Bang Peterson and the Hope Project, and looking at the effect of, well, scary information as opposed to constructive information. You see people actually being willing to change behavior much more and much more consistent if they're provided with good information.
Hmm.
Another question, though, you during well, maybe 20 minutes ago, you mentioned the distinction between digital literacy and e-health literacy. Um, and from a lot of what we've talked about so far, um, we've maybe been focusing a lot on something that had a information service, providing information to people, allowing them
Hmm.
to get more information on stuff.
Hmm.
But in the e-health, one of the really different ways is that suddenly you have people providing information to the system.
Hmm.
They can possibly. Um, are we, I'm not sure which we are talking about, but when we introduce the e-health literacy and allow people to provide their information, um, are we using that information at all? I mean, does it make, are we using these apps to actually gather information? Is that then in the information then used in a good way? Are we really there, or are we just using apps as another way of bombarding more information on these innocent users?
Well, I
What
think
would?
many of them are not as innocent as you make them out to be. First of all, and second of all, yes, we are using this information, and we live in the information age, and data is like the new currency, right?
Mhm.
Problem is we're using it in a very economical way, right? It's about money. It's
Mhm.
about very much so marketing,
Mhm.
targeted marketing most of the time. We are not as much using it to really promote healthy lifestyles. And the thing is, that's the one thing. When we're talking about e-health most of the time, like I said before, we are talking about health issues, like, prevalences of illnesses, right? We
Hmm.
should be focusing more on prevention, on well-being, on health-related lifestyles that should be promoted. And
Hmm.
via the apps, for example, this could be a great way when you're gathering data from the Fitbit or whatever, in order to, kind of make recommendations, play it back to the people, give them information on how to be proactive about their health. I think this is something we should focus on way more, and not just, when they are already being diagnosed with something, or when they already have like a chronic thing going on. Before that, that's the step that we should focus on, in my opinion.
Because when users I mean, user-generated data, that's my blood pressure, that's my steps, that's my whatever. Um, I'm guessing that I'm putting words in your mouth here, I suppose, but that they
Yeah, I
trust.
will tell you when you do that. Don't worry.
That they maybe because they trust their own data more than I mean, when you are able to see yourself in the mirror, are you more comfortable in actually being being actively engaged in your own health when you can see that it's your blood pressure that's being stayed in? I mean, it's not that they don't trust the doctor, I suppose, when they go to the doctor, but when they can actually see the effects in real life on their own data, is that a inherently better way of doing stuff?
Then
Um,
what? Then compared to what?
I mean, in a way, of course. I mean, we if we trust in science and we think that of the doctors or the nurses or the whatever um, as some kind of of representative of science in that way, we should have trust that particular advice and do what they say because we are trusting science. If we say that we instead that we need to have proof from our own data that it works, I mean, sometimes the good old, I knew this guy, he smoked for 50 years and he didn't get cancer. So there's a challenge sometimes of being granular in your data because, of course, you can't always see something happening to yourself. Um, because you're an outlier, because it has just haven't happened yet, or all kinds of good reasons. So the while the user generated data can of course be a way to gather more trust, it can also be sometimes be hiding that the science behind of what the doctor or the nurse is telling you is still true, even though you can't see it in your particular data. Um,
You
is
know, you
that
know what I think, what the biggest problem here really is, and that's like also from my experience whenever I talk to people, it's less that people do not understand the data or that it's misleading or whatever. It's more the collection of the data as such, the algorithms that are being used that are not being made available to the people in order to understand what's going on, in order to understand what's being done with the data. I think people would not resist having their data collected for health reasons so much if the process would be more transparent, like what is happening with the data. And we all know that there's been some cases like in Australia with health insurances where, data was being collected and then it was sold to health insurances. And then all of a sudden the health insurance policies exploded and the money the people had to pay, right? If stuff like that happens, of course, people get very, very much aware of that. And then, of course, they will not participate in anything. At least I know in Austria that is very often the case that people are being very like suspicious. Like, what are you doing with my data? I don't want my data floating around on the internet. Well, if it's made transparent of what is being done with it, mishaps can always happen. And misuse can always happen. You don't have a guarantee for that, but you can at least make it transparent of why it is important to collect certain data and what benefit it will have for you. But in order for that to happen, the companies who collect the data will need to make their algorithms transparent for everyone, you know. I remember, for example, I was like a colleague of mine. He was doing studies on suicide and, what effect, I don't know if you recall the TV show 13 Reasons Why, right, on Netflix. There was like a suicide being displayed in a very graphic way, and then the suicides kind of rose. It's called the Werther effect, from Goethe. And we were kind of trying to find out from Netflix, like the numbers, like how many people viewed that show. You can't get any numbers, right? If you're going to Google as a researcher or Facebook and you're trying to do anything, any kind of research on their algorithms, you can't do that. You will not get the information on the algorithms and the numbers. You will not, mostly because they might not even know it themselves anymore due to deep learning, but also because they have their own research center doing their own research, but God knows what they're doing, right? And people know that. So people are being very suspicious about any new e-healths, being introduced, where they should just freely give away very, very personal data. Like, what is going to happen with it? Can anyone
Hmm.
tell me? Can the health practitioner tell me? The health practitioner just knows what to make with the data that is the output of it. Does the health practitioner know what is happening in between? Can he answer my questions to this regard? No, he can't. So I'm going to
Hmm.
stay suspicious. So I think this is something we should really work on.
The answer to the dilemma that I created before is just transparency, transparency, and transparency.
I think so, yes. Because, we are, these days, it's not like when you go to the doctor, you're not being the uninformed patient anymore. Most people are being informed patients, right? So they're studying, I mean, many of them asking Dr. Google, which might not be the best idea, but most of them are studying their symptoms. They're going there with certain ideas, already of what they might have or what they don't have. So doctors are not the gods in white anymore. So we should, when we're talking about digital literacy, health literacy, media literacy, we should make the information available to the people. If you don't make it available to them, they're not going to be able to engage in it, to understand it, and to come to a conclusion, an informed conclusion, whether they really want to give away some of their health data in order to, prevent certain chronic illnesses that could otherwise, affect them, or not. They
Hmm.
cannot make an informed decision if they are lacking the information.
So, I mean, so far we've talked a little bit about how parents might consider um, learning, and also then maybe sharing some more digital literacy or good ways. We talked about teachers, society, media, sharing algorithms. Um, I mean, the Got-IT project is one that we're building a guideline for digital developers.
Hmm.
How you say for the digital developers that again that transparency is one of the things that you would advise them on, or how about what would be the key ways that they could better navigate so that they use, I hope, their own digital literacy best when they're trying to build these new tools?
Well, you know, from my experience working in interdisciplinary projects, working especially with like engineers or developers, like people who, for all of their life, have not studied social dynamics, for example, but were rather focused on an output, right? Um, and this might be a stereotype of mine, but it's my gut feeling talking here right now. I think that developers very much so are focused on the output, which is the app, right? So if they design an app, they think of the functionality. They might think of what users might need in order to, sell more of the app, but they don't have the user as such in mind. The one, like what kind of benefits those users could have. Who are the users really? Like, what does their life look like? How can they include the app into their daily routines? I think this is something that is being overlooked, especially when it comes to developing apps. It's not just about having the newest fancy gadget. which might be cool, but it's nothing that will keep me interested for long-term involvement with the app, right? If I don't see a benefit for myself in it. And I think this is something that the developers are really overlooking. And I think this is something like, especially I've seen it again with Got-IT, like in terms of how much experience do developers even have with people with low e-health literacy, for example? Well, big question mark, right?
It sounds a little bit like something that some people might call anthropology, doesn't it?
Oh my God, yes. I'm a social
Hmm.
scientist, so this is part of the deal. Anthropology, yeah. It's one of the tool sets that we use in order to look at different social dynamics, yes.
But of course, training engineers to become the anthropologists of tomorrow, well, that would be one way of doing it, maybe. But another way would maybe also to work in a more interdisciplinary way.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
would you rather prefer one or the other?
Well, to be very honest, I can tell you from
Idea.
my own experience. While I was still studying at the University of Vienna, I did an extra curriculum on knowledge experts, actually, which was a very interdisciplinary curriculum. So I was paired with um, people who studied physics, people who studied natural anthropology, right? Mathematicians, philosophers, and we all kind of learned the same things working in projects, thinking about how knowledge is being created also in the online world. And I can tell you, it was really hard. I remember we had this one session where we divided each other up into groups. One being the social scientists, one being the natural scientists, and we got like a flip chart, each one of us, the two groups, and we had to define on this flip chart what our discipline is. So I was put together with political scientists and sociologists, and I myself is a communication scientist. Damn, we had such a hard time defining, and we're all being social scientists, right? Defining what social science is. So now, if you think of the different cultures within the social science and also of the different cultures between in the natural sciences, if they cannot even understand each other and they belong to the same school of thought, how much it takes in order for these different, totally different schools of thoughts to work together. And I think this is also this is a sort of literacy that we should be working on too in terms of creating new knowledge, like say in the realm of e-health and e-health development and digital literacies, the understanding of the different disciplines and that there is no winner or loser. We are just best if we work together and if we use a wording that we all understand, you know.
Hmm. I'm paraphrasing, I suppose, Churchill in saying that democracy is a messy process, but it's still the best one we've got.
Yes.
Um, is that, I mean, do we also need some of these? I mean, if social sciences are supposed to help, um, I'm being a little bit stereotypical about it here, but if social scientists are supposed to help engineers, and the social scientists are not really agreeing on what to help them with, that might be a challenging proposition. Is there also for when we're talking about what digital literacy? I mean, we are on a learning curve, all of us still, as well as scientists too.
Yes, definitely.
I,
Definitely.
I,
Like I
managed,
said,
I managed to call myself a scientist here. That was really a trick. Yes. Uh,
it worked out.
yeah.
Now, honestly, I think, like I said before, what we should really, really look into, we're always throwing around, this, it's a buzzword, digital literacy, e-health literacy, right? What we should really look into at this point is what is this construct made of and which discipline can contribute what? And also taking those disciplines seriously, amongst each other. Like I said, there's no win or lose if we cannot agree on one baseline and work together on a goal in order to improve e-health apps or e-health literacy in general.
That's a very good, if not exclamation mark, but an ending remark for this Got It Talks. If we can't actually collaborate and work together, I mean, it's really hard to create a good product. So
Yes,
thank
it
you very
is.
much for Got It Talks today, Yvonne, and thank you
You're
for
welcome.
joining this talk. And hopefully I'll see you next week for the next session of Got It Talks. Thank you.
Thank you.